All right, this is an overview of Chapter 21 on modern advertising, 1900 to the present. Now, this is a very large chapter, but I just want to hit some high points and hopefully not spend a tremendous amount of time really drilling into this. So let's go ahead and get talking about some basic things that I want you to pay attention to, want you to understand about advertising. Now, Chapter 21, Chapter 22 are talking about advertising and public relations. The big thing to understand about this is they are, in one sense, flip sides of the same coin. Advertising is overtly trying to get the public to perform some action or do something that you want them to do. Telling them to buy a product, vote for a candidate, to do something, support some cause, employ some service. PR, on the other hand, is trying to create an advantageous environment for a product, service, candidate, etc., etc., etc. So keep that in mind as you start looking through these chapters and as you're looking through the content that's online. So the time frame is very important. It's very interesting as you look at the history of American media. Because things start changing tremendously in the, really late 1800s and then on into the early 1900s. In this chapter, one of the things I really want you to start paying attention to is your book starts talking about Albert Lasker, but there's actually a whole group of folks that kind of come out at the same time and start a paradigm shift in advertising. A few that your book talks about are Lasker, Kennedy, Hopkins. That starts on page 433, I believe, in your book. Talks about how psychology basically starts playing into this. Prior to the 1930s, prior to about 1910 or so, advertising was very descriptive. Essentially, advertising was, here's the product, here's what it does. If you have this problem, here's this thing, and it will do this thing for it. It was a very clinical. Now, that's not to say that there wasn't perhaps art that was associated with it, but it was, again, very, very clinical. One of the things your book points out, and it's very important to understand, is that in the 1900s, things become a little bit more poetic, a little bit more literary, I believe is the term that your book tends to use with this. We start painting a picture of what some historians have called the good life. Now, this has been shown in broadsides, this has been shown in pamphlets, but it really starts ramping up in the 1900s. We start painting a picture of what life could be or should be if you were to just purchase the right products or have the right services. If you just employ the right lifestyle products, then you can have a particular lifestyle. So I want you to pay attention to the work of Albert Lasker. That's very important. The concept of salesmanship in print. And what's really fascinating, and this carries on to today, is the discussion of picking out, how do they put this? Picking out, on page 433, emphasizing something unusual or memorable about a product. Think about any products that you've seen where essentially it says something about how the product is made, or something about what the product does, as if only this product does this thing. There's a wonderful section of the book that I'm going to read to you right now that says, in one ad written before he joined Lord and Thomas, he stressed the purity of Schlitz beer because the brewery steam cleaned its bottles. All breweries, of course, did the same thing, but Hopkins preempted the idea and offered it as an argument for drinking Schlitz. Think about that. He came out first. He was the first one that came out and said, basically, our beer is better because the brewery steam cleans the vats in which the beer is brewed. And everybody else is looking around who makes beer, looks around and goes, we all do that. Everybody does this. But the average public, or the general public, the average person on the street goes, wow, that's pretty amazing. I want clean, crisp, pure beer. Of course, who wouldn't? They steam clean. Nobody else is telling me that they steam clean, but they steam clean. To all the other brewers, they look at this and go, well, why would we do this? Everybody does this. Why would we make a big deal about it? It's just par for the course. It's something that you just do. But nobody else is advertising this. Nobody else is promoting this. So now if everybody else comes in and goes, yeah, we steam clean too, they look like Johnny come lately. They look like they're late to the party. And Schlitz says, well, we were the first ones to tell you that we were steam clean. Look at these folks coming after the fact. They obviously are just trying to catch up. So this is something that started coming in with Lasker and Kennedy. This was something that started in the 1900s, or late 1800s, 1900s. And it was, believe it or not, kind of revolutionary. And this kind of thing continues on today. I will post a video for something called the Dyson DC-10, if I can still find the video. It's a fascinating video. I'm going to talk about this very quickly. The Dyson DC-10 was a vacuum cleaner that was a small vacuum cleaner, upright, and the Dyson company basically was about to roll this out. They did market research, and people liked the vacuum overall. But the vacuum was actually had a problem. The bin was a little bit smaller than every other vacuum on the market. People realized, man, it's smaller. I have to empty it out a lot. That's the one downside of this vacuum. So do they redesign the vacuum? No. They got the idea of, well, we're going to roll out a whole campaign that basically shows people vacuuming with this and then empty it. Vacuuming with it, empty it. And what they say is they rolled out an ad that says, it's got this wonderful new suction head. It follows the contours of your floor. It has more suction than anybody else. You know, it does all these things and shows people emptying the bin with the illusion, with the suggestion that the reason you're emptying it so often, they don't say it, but they suggest this, with the suggestion, the reason you're emptying it so often is because it's sucking so much more dirt. It's not the reason. That's not it. It's just slightly smaller than every other one on the market. But that was the campaign. That was what they were doing and trying to do with their advertising. So it's very powerful, and this all goes back to the early 1900s. So pay attention to this. Of course, when you start doing something like this, you get some feedback, you get some backlash / pushback. So Truth in Advertising section kind of talks about some of the pushback on all of this. So pay attention to that. Look through the wartime advertising. Things change tremendously, and consider the good life idea, this idea of products purchased to build this life style, what your life could be with the right purchases, the right car, clothes, soaps, food, soft drinks even. Posted some videos from Coca-Cola, which was very, very interesting in the early 1900s and heck onto today. So you can take a look at some of those early ads, as well as the automobile industry in the early 1900s. In wartime, it became even more important as you're starting to look at us versus them imagery. What is the image of American life versus life in other parts of the world, like Europe, for example? So pay attention to how the us versus them imagery is discussed. This again talks about World War I, World War II. Yeah, okay, I'm not going to dig too much into this. Start looking at brand characters. There's a inset on 441 talking about advertising icons. The personification of a brand is something that goes all the way back to even before, to a certain degree, the Quaker Oats, where you actually start identifying your brand with a persona, with an actual character, something that's very difficult. well, let me put it this way. If you are talking about insurance, insurance is complicated. Insurance can be scary. Insurance is something that sometimes is a topic that you may not be comfortable really approaching. So do you want to think about a giant monolithic company that is worth billions and billions of dollars, or do you want to think about a somewhat sarcastic, wry, but approachable lady in a smock, or tiny green lizard, or any number of other personifications of the brand? This is the power of advertising icons. Instead of having a billion-dollar hamburger industry, you have an approachable clown that's selling you hamburgers. Instead of having a billion-dollar dairy industry, you have a smiling cow on a sunflower. By creating an advertising icon, this basically creates a person that individuals can relate to. A more personable relationship can be formed between an individual and a brand. And while we talk about that now, and that's a big topic of interest now within media research, that has gone back for, centuries really. And advertisers have known the power of that sort of relationship. So there's some discussion in that I'd like you to pay attention to. The use of women and minorities in advertising has always been somewhat problematic. It's getting better, obviously, over the last few decades, but it has been problematic for years and years and years and years and years. And so the chapter 21 ends with that. It's something I would like you to pay attention to as well. Let me go ahead and jump on into I'm going to end this video here so I can go ahead and jump into chapter 22 next. Okay. If you have any questions about chapter 21, please let me know, and be happy to answer them.